Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. This week, a 5-person panel is set to decide the future of internet usage in the US.
But could it change the World Wide Web as we know it? Find out what some people say yes. Here in the United States, the Federal Communications Commission will vote Thursday on whether or not to roll back Obama-era regulations protecting net neutrality.
Net neutrality. It's a hot button term, but what does it mean? Well, it's the principle that internet service providers, or ISPs, grant access to web content regardless of the source and without favor. Most everyone agrees that net neutrality is a good thing, but not everyone agrees with the best way to maintain it. The vote, in all likelihood, will be a 3-2 split in favor of rolling back regulations.
While critics of those regulations will no doubt applaud the vote, advocates fear that it will end the internet as we know it. Joining us to talk about all of this, Gigi Sohn. She's an ex-counsellor to FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, the former the head of the FCC. He oversaw the organisation during the Obama administration. Also in our studio, Tom Struble. He's the Technology Policy Manager at R Street Institute. That's a Washington think tank. And joining via Skype in Oakland, California, Malkia Cyril, who's the founder and executive director of the Center for Media Justice. It's good to have you here, everybody. Welcome, everybody. And we start off with a video. We could say this video is the worst case scenario from Battle for the Net. This is their version of what might happen if net neutrality goes away. Have a look. One version of net neutrality. What might happen if the end is nigh?
Well, that's one person's version. Here's another person's worst case scenario. This is Ryan on Twitter. He says, AJ Stream, great to hear you're covering this. Get the word out so you won't have to change your name to the dribble. Net neutrality is the hashtag he used. So Gigi, we're laughing there, but for our audience that may not understand what he means by that and why that's a bad thing, can you explain for us?
Let me explain what the FCC is planning to do on Thursday. It's going to do 3 things. First of all, it's going to deregulate broadband internet access, the on-ramps to the internet. So the FCC is basically abdicating its role in protecting consumers and competition when it comes to broadband. That's number 1. Number 2, it is eliminating the rules that prohibit ISPs from blocking content, from throttling content, and from putting in place fast lanes. So in other words, having online service providers pay for faster and better service, which not necessarily means that there will be others in the slow lane. Okay, the third thing it's doing is it's preempting, it's prohibiting the states in the United States from adopting their own laws to protect consumers. So not only is the FCC saying, sorry, we're not going to protect you, but the states can't protect you either.
Malkia, have you seen this yet, though? Blocking, throttling, fast and slow lanes. If we go back to before the Obama-era FCC changes, were there any of those things actually happening that you saw?
Well, we know, for a fact that Comcast was found to be, found that it was blocking peer-to-peer technologies that its customers were using over the network. We know that Verizon blocked a tweet, or some content from Planned Parenthood. We know that these incidents have taken place. We know this isn't new. So when people say, hey, this isn't going to happen, it's never happened before, the fact is it's just a straight up lie.
Tom.
So the internet's a big place with billions of users. Of course, there are going to be problems and growing pains along the way, but I think there's a lot more good than bad. I think the internet has been an overwhelmingly positive thing for all of society. And, we should regulate it in some way to protect consumers and entrepreneurs, online companies from, the biggest and the worst of the harms. But there are different ways to go about doing that. And I mean, I think Gigi is pretty, spot on in her characterization of what the FCC is doing. I wouldn't say they're abdicating their entire role because they're still requiring transparency and they're proposing to work together with the FTC, but they're abdicating their primary role as the protector of the internet. And then also, they're not preempting all state regulations either, but only state regulations that conflict with the FCC's policy. So it's conflict preemption rather than field preemption. But that's deep into legal weeds.
You're not selling it to me, though, Tom.
Well, what do you want to buy?
Thank you for giving me the option. That may well be the problem in the future. Malika.
So here is one scenario. This is from Rob, #SaveNetNeutralitySheridan on Twitter. And Tom, I'll direct this to you. He says, the problem is we have no idea what will happen. Net neutrality is a protection against a myriad of bad scenarios. He goes on to say, the open internet has changed the world in so many ways. There's never been anything like it in terms of globally democratizing information, communication. There's so many reasons to preserve net neutrality, but the only reason to kill it is to increase internet service provider profits, which are doing fine. What would you say to that?
Well, I'd say that's not the only reason to do away with it. And first, I would challenge the premise. I don't think we're getting rid of it. We're switching from an approach to net neutrality based on ex ante, prescriptive rules, to an approach to net neutrality based on ex post, flexible standards, case-by-case adjudication.
This is the lawyer talking. Okay, so for our audience that aren't lawyers, so then the only reason to kill it is to increase ISP profits. What's wrong with that statement?
So I don't necessarily think that ISP profits are going to go up. I think we're going to see more broadband competition going forward. And while you might see profits go up in the short term, over the long term, this should be good for broadband competition. Will eventually drive down prices for consumers. And also the benefit.
Sorry, Tom. I've never seen my bill for my internet service provider. It has never gone down. In fact, every year I ring up and negotiate.
And can I cut in here? Because
Yeah.
that's because there is no competition for broadband internet
Right.
access in the United States. So
I love the
even
idea of it
this-
going down, but I've never seen, has your bill ever gone down?
So
Mine
in
hasn't.
absolute terms, maybe that doesn't happen, but in relative terms, in terms of what you're getting for the money, you're getting faster speeds all the time. You're getting more access to services through your pipe. So the value in terms of what you're getting for what you're paying could actually be going up. And also, even if you're getting the same amount of value and even prices are going up, they may not go up as fast as otherwise would be.
Would you mind if I just lay down some numbers here? So this is Ajit Pai,
Yes,
FCC's own numbers. 58% of census blocks in this country have a choice of either 0 or 1 broadband internet access provider. 87% of in the definition of what broadband is that the FCC takes right now, okay? 87% of the country has a choice of 2 or fewer. And by the way, when you measure by census blocks, the way the FCC measures is if one person in the census block has internet access, that means everybody does. So the fact of the matter is that even fewer Americans have access to 2. Okay, so the vast majority of Americans have fewer than 2 choices, and that's why your prices stay high. I don't see any reason by eliminating the FCC's oversight and giving it to the FTC, which has far fewer powers, okay? The FTC has far fewer legal and powers and technical expertise to deal with this issue.
So
I don't know, your prices go
Communications
down.
Commission to a Trade Commission. So the Trade Commission has less expertise, you're
Correct.
saying. Let me share this with you, Malkia. This is from Dele. He says, net neutrality is an issue that affects Americans regardless of party affiliations and parties' interest. But it does feel like this is very much a political conversation. Why?
This is a political conversation. Let me say this. Let me start by saying net neutrality enjoys bipartisan support. This is not a Democrat issue, an issue of Republicans. This is an issue of fundamental communication rights. We got 700 protests, right? 7 million comments, evidence of record level participation. Who's making this a political issue, making this a political football is Trump's FCC, right? FCC Chairman Ajit Pai has turned this into a sideshow. We have bots that are participating in the comment period. We have 50 million comments that have come from from Russian email addresses. This is not a debate that should be treated like a political football. We understand that you would not put the First Amendment out on the stock market. You have to protect it. And these rules do that. And so making this a kind of a political football that's getting tossed back and forth between, Republicans and Democrats, that's just not the reality. The reality is the vast majority of Americans support net neutrality. The reality is that we need it in order to prosper. The reality is that we need it for democracy. That's the bottom line.
And so what this actually means for people in their everyday lives is one of the main themes that people online at least are tweeting to us that they don't really understand about this conversation because they don't know how it affects them. So here are two examples from people, and these are their perspectives. This is Johnny on Twitter, who says people of color, the LGBT community, indigenous peoples, religious minorities rely on the open internet to organize, access economic, educational opportunities, and fight back against systemic discrimination. So organizing on the one hand, on the other is medical purposes. This is a video comment we got from a doctor in Washington, D.C., and this is what she said.
African Americans are 2 to 4 times more likely to suffer from complications from diabetes and 2 to 4 times more likely to die from it. But telemedicine and mobile health apps allow providers to remotely monitor blood glucose levels, manage diabetes, and educate diabetes patients, all while reducing the need for outpatient visits and reducing overall medical costs. It's important to note that nowadays, even finding a healthcare provider and booking medical appointments is something that we've been pushed to do online. Everyone deserves the opportunity to have good health, and that requires access to healthcare innovation. This means everyone needs to have consistent and reliable internet access. So repealing the 2015 net neutrality regulations would not only exacerbate already existing health disparities, but also continue to nurture a perverted healthcare system that favors the haves at the expense of the have-nots.
So Malkia, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me say this. I spend my time protesting against police brutality. I spend my time organizing around a number of issues in my community. And we use the internet on a daily basis to connect with folks in different parts of the country on these issues. Let me say this, that without the open internet, Black Lives Matter, the movement and the message could not have reached millions of people, right? We would not know about many of these cases of police violence if not for the fact that ISPs cannot block any of that content. They can't slow it down. We don't have to depend on CNN or anyone, really. We can depend on AJ Stream, to be able to move a message. The fact is that, for me personally, my wife has stage 4 gastroesophageal cancer. And, on a pretty much nightly basis, you'll find me sitting on the couch with the light, a small light on me, with me searching the internet for alternative cures and alternative treatments and all kinds of things to manage and navigate this illness. I don't want an ISP to be able to slow down my traffic. I don't want an ISP to be able to direct me to a preferred site that they want me to visit, where there might be some profit gained or some back-end deal made. I need to be able to choose as the user, as the person whose life depends on access to that information. I need to be able to choose.
So this, for me, this is about two things. And I think for most people, as Malkia so eloquently says, this is about whether you and I control our internet experience. That has been the experience of the internet since its inception, okay? If you repeal net neutrality, and again, this is a radical decision because never before has an FCC chairman, either Republican or Democrat, said, we don't want to have any role overseeing consumers and competition when it comes to broadband internet access, okay? This is about whether Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, your ISP will control that experience for you, will decide winners and losers, much like cable television. That's number one. The number two effect, and this is really important, I worked at the FCC for 3 years. People come to the FCC for protection against anti-consumer and anti-competitive practices of internet service providers, practices from cable companies. This decision will give consumers pretty much nowhere to go if, for example, Comcast one day decides to double its prices. There's nothing the Federal Trade Commission can do about that. So the FCC is known by the public as the place to go to get relief when their ISP, when their cable company engages in practices that they believe to be anti-consumer.
So I'll jump in and push back a little bit on that, because I think if Comcast were to double its prices overnight, that would be an exercise of market power, which the FTC, under its antitrust authority, the UMC, Unfair Methods of Competition, could bring an enforcement action.
Slow down a little bit. Let me show you something here, and then we'll get back to it. Look at this headline here. Comcast deleted the net neutrality pledge the same day the FCC announced repeal. The same day. All right, and then you're going to say in language that everybody who has internet access in the US can actually understand.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So yeah, they deleted one pledge and replaced it with another pledge, where the really only substantive change between the two pledges is they changed their promise to not engage in a paid prioritization to not engage in a harmful prioritization, which is a big change. Basically, switching from the FCC to the FTC is a more permissive regulatory environment for prioritization. Some of that could be things like telemedicine. That's a common example people put forward. But a more mundane example would just be, prioritized gaming or video traffic, which could be particularly useful in the context of broadband competition, because as Gigi points out, a lot of people don't have access to high-speed broadband, but almost every American has access to two providers, because we had an incumbent telco and an incumbent cable operator in every city. Now the telcos haven't upgraded the networks with fiber, might not be able to offer speeds that match the cable guys. But if the telco could offer a prioritized gaming service and, say, pair their limited bandwidth with a satellite-based delivery mechanism for video, which coincidentally AT&T has a.
Malkia saying. Let me just share this with you. Malkia, there's this here, and you can tell me if you feel that this is useful for us here. Tom wrote a piece 2 years back in May. Don't freak out about the FCC's new approach to net neutrality. Are you freaking out?
Yeah, because this is not an approach to net neutrality. This is an approach to monopoly. This is an approach to infringing upon the basic communication rights of Americans across the country. This is not a fight between two sides who both think net neutrality is great but disagree on how to make it happen. One side, the side that is the ISPs, the side that is Ajit Pai, the side that is Donald Trump, that side wants to actually see greater control over the internet, not by you and me, but by ISPs and authoritarian governments. And this is not just in this country. We know that this is a global battle right now around who will control the internet. Will it be everyday people like myself, like you, like the people sitting at home watching this show, or will it be big companies? That's the issue at hand here. It's not about two sides that both want net neutrality. They don't want net neutrality. They want inequality. They want to profit from discrimination. They've been profiting from discrimination before we had these rules. They'll continue to profit from discrimination if these rules are repealed. Period.
So let me bring in this other perspective. This is Josh, and he is a former stream guest. He was actually on our last show about the FCC. Josh says, I'm not sure it matters which way we go with net neutrality, because I'm optimistic that regardless of legislation, technology, entrepreneurship will bring us faster, cheaper, more open internet. Another person, and Tom, I'll direct this to you, Jarrett, replied to his tweet and said, I appreciate those thoughts. The fear-mongering on the left is hard to completely believe, and if it does get really bad, the law and the policy can just change. It seems like a worthwhile experiment to try another way. Is that how you're viewing this, that if it's really that bad, it can change?
Yeah, I would say I do agree with those sentiments, broadly speaking, because transferring oversight of broadband providers to the Federal Trade Commission, they have both their antitrust authority, no unfair methods of competition, and also consumer protection authority, no unfair or deceptive acts or practices. So if an ISP is doing something that's unfair, either to other broadband providers, to consumers, to edge providers, the FTC can bring a case. All they have to do is show that there's consumer harm, either actual or likely consumer harm. Like the FCC, we have this notion of the virtuous cycle, and that broadband providers will interfere with that, and so we need to regulate them to prevent that. That theory is a theory of likely harm to consumers. Anyone who supports virtuous cycle can take that to the FTC and say, hey, here's some evidence of likely harm, bring a case.
Let me explain why the Federal Trade Commission is not. Let me explain why the Federal Trade Commission is not adequate. And in fact, if you go back just 1 week, Terrell McSweeney, who's an FTC commissioner, said in an op-ed that her own agency does not have the proper tools to protect the public when it comes to anti-competitive and anti-consumer actions by broadband providers. I think that's really important. This is a sitting commissioner. Okay, the FTC does not make rules. Okay, Tom can talk all day long. You can talk all day long about what you think antitrust law can and cannot do. In addition to antitrust cases being long and expensive, you cannot say with certainty, unless you're a judge, that it would prevent blocking, it would prevent throttling, it would prevent fast lanes. The 2015 rules prevent all those things. We have rules that work. Why do we want to give them to another agency who lacks expertise and strong authority?
Yes, the campaign for either for or against net neutrality or little tweaks to it, it's been really fierce over the last couple of months. Let me show you some of the celebrity endorsements and pushback that have been happening. Mark Ruffalo, taking away net neutrality is the authoritarian dream. Let me just have a look to see what Cher's been saying. Net neutrality means Trump can change the internet. It will include less Americans, not more, shouting in all caps. Alyssa Milano's been very busy lately, had time though to tweet. Funny thing happened yesterday. Ajit Pai, FCC, attacked me for using my voice to speak out against his plan to kill net neutrality. But what has Ajit Pai, the head of FCC, got to say? This is what he told Fox News on Monday. Have a listen.
The hysteria has reached a pitch which is completely disproportionate to the facts. I mean, as I said, we weren't living in a broken internet in 2015. All of these harms that these celebrities and whatnot are talking about are all hypothetical. There's no market failure here. Internet service providers are not and have not blocked content willy-nilly. And we're confident going forward that given the robust rules that we have and that the Federal Trade Commission has, they won't going forward as well.
But we know Facebook, Google, and Twitter.
We did ask Ajit Pai to be part of this conversation. He declined. A bit busy right now. Malika?
So this is a perspective, of course, this conversation is happening in the U.S., but because we're a global TV show, this is what we're getting from abroad. This is Nigel, who says, sitting here in Zimbabwe, this show reiterates just how important access to information has become in this digital age, which flows into this question we just got on YouTube. T-Man says, how does this affect the rest of the world? Do U.S. laws and regulations stop at their borders? Gigi, does the rest of the world, should they be paying attention?
The rest of the world is paying attention. And we have served in the past as a model for the rest of the world. And that's one of the reasons that this decision to eliminate net neutrality and consumer protections gives me so much pause. I will say, however, that India has rejected what we're doing, and I'm delighted. In fact, they've adopted rules that are even stronger than what we adopted in 2015. So I say to the rest of the world, follow India, don't follow us.
Gigi, what are you expecting to happen? Excuse me, Gigi. Malkia, what are you expecting to happen?
Well, I expect, when you say what am I expecting to happen, you mean during the vote?
Yeah. What do you think the vote might be? Do you feel like, despite your campaigning, that you know what the result will be?
You know, my hope is that over the next day or so that there will be so much resistance to this set of policy or the set of rules that Ajit Pai is putting forward that he'll wake up, that he will wake up, hear the wake-up call and rescind the order, delay the vote. I mean, hopefully he will begin to cooperate with the New York, attorney's office to be able to investigate all of the fraud that we've seen in the comment process. In some way, my hope is that the FCC will actually collaborate and cooperate with the American people instead of undermining the democracy we depend on. However, what is most likely to happen is that they will rescind the 2015 order, and we will take them to court.
Malkia and Tom and Gigi, thank you so much. What Malkia was referring to a little bit earlier was this public consultation process where some of the names that have been put forward are fraudulent names, so that even the public consultation process has been not necessarily that accurate at all. Malika.
This is a last tweet I'll give to Sadaf, who says, this will definitely have an impact. The global influence of the U.S. and of American online companies means that repealing net neutrality within the country's borders would pose an existential threat to net neutrality around the world. Of course, perhaps except for India.
Thank you so much to our guests. Thank you for joining us online as well and on TV. The conversation continues always online at #AJStream. See you there.